Hey everyone, welcome to the Raising Rices podcast. I am joined today with my amazing friend Mary, and we are doing something a little different, which I'm really excited to introduce. What I have decided and begged my amazing friends to do with me is to do a series on real moms with real problems, with a real God that shows up. I absolutely love being encouraged by big influencers, even amazing podcast moms that already have it established. But there is something special and real that God meets each of us where we're at, no matter how many followers we have. Right, Mary?
Yes, amen.
So today, like I said, my amazing friend, Mary Rabe, is joining me because she, in her generosity and encouraging nature, came out here to Idaho. We are actually in the same room right now. She came out here to support me putting on a homeschool workshop that I did out of my home this weekend. It was super fun.
So fun.
Lots about parenting, lots about homeschooling, and lots of fellowship, which was the coolest part.
Absolutely.
So good. So today for this podcast, Mary and I are going to talk about something very near and dear to her heart and something that I've been able to walk through with her and glean so much wisdom from. So I know you're going to love it. Mm-hmm. But we're calling it Raising Out of the Box Kids. And I thought I was going to mess that up and say it backwards because of my dyslexia, which just shows I'm an out-of-the-box kid.
There you go.
Right?
I love it.
And her heart is so big for her family and for others too. So I'm just going to let Mary kind of open up and tell us a little bit about herself, about her family, about her passions, even if it doesn't have to do with raising out-of-the-box kids. Just so we can get to know this real amazing mom.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so glad to get to be here with you, and then I get to hopefully help encourage some other moms and families. I love when God gives us the opportunities to do that. So thank you so much for letting me be on here. So I'm Mary. I have been married to my husband, Jed, it will be 17 years in August. Yes, we're nearing the 2 decades. I'm so excited. We have 3 kids. I have a 13-year-old son, an 11-year-old daughter, and then my youngest son will be 9 in April, so coming up pretty soon. And I homeschool all of them. I have homeschooled them from the start. I was actually homeschooled myself. I was an out-of-the-box kid. So the preschool that I had been enrolled in decided they did not want to try to work with me anymore.
I can't even imagine.
I was a challenging child, and so they kicked me out, or rather my mom pulled me out before they could kick me out and decided that she would just try to homeschool me herself, and that was a much better fit. I really thrived getting to be at home with my mom, and I had 3 little brothers, and so I knew from then on that was something that I wanted to do with my kids. So I'm really blessed to be able to, I'm literally living the dream. Like, sometimes the dream looks a little different than we might think, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but this is literally my dream, and I am so thankful to God for letting me have the privilege and the opportunity. So, yeah, that's me.
There's so much more to Mary too, but I know in a short podcast you won't be able to hear all the amazing things. But I will tell you an inside secret that Mary and I actually met as belly buddies. Yes. My oldest and her middle, we were in a birth class together, and I met her, and I was like, we're going to be friends.
Absolutely.
She's just so encouraging, and thankfully it was really fun at this homeschool workshop. Mary was on our question and answer panel, and I was able to introduce her and kind of tell people that she was one of the first people I went to be like, okay, tell me about this homeschooling thing. Tell me what you're doing. And it was so encouraging. And I just echo again that I can't believe you got, or someone tried to kick you out of a preschool, because you're like the sweetest person I've ever met.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, God can do a lot of cool redeeming work. And when He kind of takes things over, then some of those messy things maybe make it hard for us to fit in and to work with the world, they can be used for really cool things. So it's all him.
I love it. And I think that's what we're kind of really going to hone in on today about. We really talk here on the Raising Rice's podcast about convictions, about character qualities, and about challenges that arise. And a conviction, I think, that both Mary and I have talked about in raising kids and being out of the box kids ourselves, is that God has created each one of us uniquely. There's not one cookie cutter kid out there that we all are trying to become, but rather we're trying to use the skills that unfortunately sin taints. We're trying to turn it for good, for God's glory. And I know you have a little catchphrase, Mary. I think you've heard it somewhere or something. Tell me about that.
So something that is a little bit more of a recent resource that my husband and I have found is a ministry called Connected Families. And so that was something that has really encouraged us with our out-of-the-box kids, and something that they had started teaching in they have a podcast, a book, they have some classes, and one of the big things that they teach is something called Gifts Gone Awry. And basically the premise of that is that with our kids, sometimes the things that are their biggest struggle, or maybe their biggest behavior challenge, or things that are just really hard for them, are actually something that would be a gift that God has given them that they could use to further his kingdom and to do really wonderful work. And because of our sin nature, it's a gift gone awry. So an example that they use is like maybe somebody that is really bossy. That is a gift gone awry. It's a gift of leadership that's gone awry. Or maybe a child that talks back. That is a gift of assertiveness, of being able to stand up for yourself, to be able to stand up for others even. But it's gone awry because they are using it against you instead of they're using it against a parent or somebody in authority that needs to be respected, as opposed to like, hey, this isn't something that you need to be defending for right now. So they have a whole list of examples actually on their website of different gifts gone awry and like what the actual gift is, how it could be coming across, and how as parents, if we can kind of hone in on what the gift is. We still need to acknowledge, the sin nature of it. But if we can point out, wow, you really seem like you have been given the gift of leadership from God, and I think he's going to use it in amazing ways. Right now, you're using that gift to be disrespectful to mommy, or you're using that gift to boss your little brother around. And that is not how God would want you to use that gift. Let's try to think of something else that we can do. And that way you're kind of helping them to recognize that God gave them gifts, that he really did form them purposefully with unique and individual personalities and everything for a purpose, and that they have a choice to use it in the way that he intended, or to give it to the more sinful nature and to use it more for themselves.
Brilliant. It's brilliant. And you know what? I think we actually also see an example with the Apostle Paul in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And he was Saul before Paul.
Yes.
Yeah, he was still God instilled in him like a zealous nature, clearly a leader and a teacher and someone to be in charge. And then sadly, that gift went awry when he used it to persecute Christians and not pursue the truth. But then God got a hold of his life, right?
Yes.
And God gets a hold of our kids' lives too. Thank you, Lord. Yeah. And when he does, we get to partner with him to help mold and direct our kids to help those sins gone awry into glorifying behaviors for him, because Paul became the Apostle Paul, gave us the majority of the New Testament, was on fire, zealous Christian leader, and that gives us hope, right?
Amen.
We see it in the Bible, we see it in real life. I can tell you, I can't tell you how many times my mom said that she thought I was going to be a lawyer one day. And
Same.
Yes. Now I know why as a mom she said that.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Okay, well, on the practical side of things, what kind of resources that you have experienced, and I know, like you just said, the Connected Families one, there's so many out there, but what kind of things really were impactful for you moving on a journey of raising kids that are just are out of the box kids?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that for me, a big thing that helped me was kind of in accepting, like for myself first, that I did have out of the box kids. I had wanted to be a mom since I was very young. I was the one reading like parenting books and like anything I could get my hands on. I wasn't even married yet. I was a teenager and I was just so excited to be a mommy. And so I had this wealth of knowledge, maybe not wisdom, but knowledge of here's the, different developmental stages of kids, and here's how they're going to be. And if I do this thing, then this is what's going to happen. So very much a formula type of a thing going on in my little head when I was younger. So then God was so gracious to give me kids. Actually, I would probably say that all three of my kids are out of the box to one level or another. Maybe one has like 1 foot in the box. One of them is so far away from the box we can't even see it. But I digress. So God was so gracious though, because if He had allowed me to have kids that fit that formula, then it would have been very much a temptation to just be like, well, these kids turned out this way because I took all this time to learn and to apply what I've done, and it would be very much this is on me and due to me. Like I think that is just a temptation anyways. And so really it was quite gracious of God, and it helps me to remember that on the really, really hard days. Because it can be frustrating when we're trying all of these things that we know have worked. Maybe they've worked with one of our kids, or maybe we see it works beautifully for our sweet friends' kids, or something, and then it does not work. It completely backfires for our kids. But then that helps me to remember that's because God made us to be in constant reliance on Him. Not on a book, not on a method, not on, like you said, cookie cutters. Like, we don't have cookie cutter kids. So that's probably one of the main things is that I'm trying to, and I'm still working on it. I even just recently, within weeks, I had been crying because I was just like, oh, Lord, I don't know if you picked the right mama for these kids. Or, like, what should I be doing with this? But then isn't that beautiful that I was going to Him? Because I know I can't go to anything else, really.
So good.
Not so many things that I can go to with out-of-the-box kids, and so I'm going to Him more and more, and I need to have that solid belief that God did choose me to be their mama, and He has purposely and beautifully designed each one of my kids not to fit in a box, but to fit in His plan and in His will, which is so much more exciting anyway. And in the world that they're going to live in, like I can't tell or see the kinds of things that they're going to need to be equipped for, but He does. And so I think that is a major thing, is that I'm really trying to shift my focus from that formula thinking and the fact that I must be a failure, there must be something wrong with me because my kids have not turned out, to more of a thinking and a realization of God gave me the gift of I don't have kids where A plus B equals C. I have kids that it's some really advanced algebraic formula that I've never been good at math, so God has a sense of humor. Yes. So, yeah.
That's great.
I don't know that I have many practical resources. Connected Families was a good one for us that just, they really do speak a lot on these kinds of kiddos, the ones that might struggle with different things. So that would be one. And then there are so many beautiful and wonderful resources like, Raising Races.
Mary, I think you brought up such a great point that as moms, when things are not going to the status quo or as well as our neighbor down the street, or we've tried to implement these things and then we are not seeing the results as other people, we can get really down on ourselves and we can feel like we're not good enough. We can feel like a failure. We can feel like these kids weren't meant for me, right? Like it just can destroy a mom. So how have you worked through that? I mean, there's probably, the church answer of Jesus, which is always the best answer. But how do you turn to Jesus and how do you work through that?
That's such a good question. Very powerful. I think that the first thing, and something that I am actively working on, even just in this season, like within a few weeks ago, I've just been really aware that I have an enemy who does not want me raising my children to love Jesus or to recognize the giftings he gave them, to use those gifts in ways that are not gone awry. Like, I think the first step is just recognizing and remembering that there is so much more to this than just me feeling like a failure. There is somebody that wants me to fail, and he knows that the best way to get me to fail is to make me think I already have. To take away your hope, to take away encouragement. Like, I think that discouragement is one of his strongest tools, and he can be so subtle about it. So for me, it has actually become, the first step is remembering and recognizing this isn't just about this moment where my child is not responding like I thought they would, or this moment where I'm questioning, like, I've done everything that I know to do. Why is it still not working? There's a deeper layer to it that can be used to do so much damage if I'm not aware and putting on that armor of God. And I am learning, again, so on the path with this right now, have not arrived at all, but I am learning to first recognize, like, no, that's a lie. This is not something that God would be telling me. God's voice is not accusatory. God's voice does not lead to discouragement. It does not lead to me wanting to give up or questioning deep truths like the fact that he chose my children for me, or that he loves me even if I do mess up. And I totally do mess up. Like, none of this is to say that sometimes it's so tricky, because sometimes the enemy uses that a little bit of a truth. Like, it's true. Sometimes I have messed up as a mom. Sometimes I have not had the patience or the character, or I have just been so lost in my own worry that I have sinned and I have messed up and failed. But you can just tell by the way that you feel. The discouragement piece is huge for me. If I'm feeling discouraged, that is not God. And I know for me now that has become a red flag. If I'm feeling discouraged, then I need to be tuning out the one voice, and I need to immediately turn to God. And I just have begun envisioning myself almost like one of the little toddlers that we have that just reach their arms up for their daddy or their mommy and I just need help. Please help. I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do right now, but I know I don't feel good. I feel discouraged. And having that picture in my head, I think that's actually something that the Lord has given me, because sometimes I can get so bogged down still in that discouragement that all I can see, I don't think any words. I don't know how to pray. I just see that image of like a little toddler reaching up for her dad and saying, help. And that's kind of become something that he is training me to use discouragement as a automatic turn to your daddy kind of a moment. So I think that that's been probably one of the biggest things for me, is recognizing I have an enemy, and it's much deeper than just me having kind of like a bummer day or like, oh, I'm not doing so well. It is literally that Satan could use that to bring me down. And if I start feeling discouraged, that's when I need to turn to Jesus and to my daddy.
Yes. So good. So good. And I love it. I love that you pointed out I'm speaking truths right now, right? Like, I am not going to allow these lies and these discouragements to become my inner voice, to become what I think, but rather I'm going to go to the truth, to the God of truth, right? I'm going to go to him, and I'm going to let him define who I am. I'm going to let him define who my children are. And I'm not going to let the world and Satan and all of these things indicate to me what to believe. I already have that from my Heavenly Father. So that's so good. I've been reading a book lately about calling out the gifts in our kids, right? Or calling out who we are designed to be. Like saying, that you are a child of God, for example, or you are courageous, or you are brave, even if they're not exhibiting those things in those moments.
Right. Yes.
But that is who we are created to be. Yes. Right? Like, we're on a journey together. Have you found that with out of the box kids, that they have a harder time knowing the truth about themselves?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yes. Trick question right now. Yeah, right. Yes. No, I really do think that being an out of the box kid, it can be really hard because I think that even from a young age, they can kind of look around and they can recognize that they are different and that they are not fitting some mold or like the box. They recognize that other kids aren't struggling like I am with this, or other kids are responding to me differently than I thought they would, or I don't see other kids even sometimes like getting in trouble as much, or they seem to have an easier time just getting through life. And so I think that it's really easy for out of the box kids to struggle with their self-esteem, but like with the confidence of being rooted in who God made them to be, and of recognizing that they were made with a purpose. And it's very easy for them to fall into the comparison trap and to look at others and to think that there is a deficit, that there is something wrong with them. Not that not that it is a simple matter of them being wired differently, being formed differently, learning differently, all of those things. As young children, it's hard for them to be able to recognize that different doesn't equal less than or worse than. So yes, absolutely. I think, yeah.
And what a beautiful thing as moms that the Lord has given us these kids, right? Because we will love them like no one else.
Absolutely. Yes.
And in that love and in that care, we then see the gem beneath, right? Like, what do they say about diamonds? That they have to go through such a refining process.
Yes. With the high pressure and the high heat and oh yeah.
Yeah. And we see the potential even on hard days, right? Like even in that argumentative, defiant, bossy, like all those gifts gone awry, in those moments, we see what could, through the sanctification and transformation of Jesus, and with our diligent prayer and hard work, we see what can happen. And I think that's wonderful. When we were talking, and my experience, I know is a little different than yours. I grew up in public school, and being an out-of-the-box kid for having dyslexia was difficult at that time because the resources that they have today weren't necessarily in place back then. And I could feel I could feel like I'm different. I could feel like I'm behind, and it definitely set me back. Like and writing was the biggest struggle for myself. And I don't think I even finished a chapter book until I was in college. But I went on to become a teacher, and now I have 7 children. Like the Lord can and does use all of us for his glory. Praise the Lord. But I think a cautionary thing, and you can speak onto this a little bit more, maybe if you'd like, just because you homeschool an out-of-the-box kid doesn't mean that they are going to go without those feelings. You're not solving the problem. You are aiding the benefit. You're aiding in the success. You're not solving the problem. Am I saying that right? How would you say?
Yes. No, I think that is really well said, that homeschooling your out-of-the-box kid does not mean that they won't find something to compare to. We still are in the world, even if we are trying really hard not to do things like the world. And our kids will still see things. My kids, even though they're homeschooled, they have definitely had struggles, some more than others, with just recognizing like other kids or even other siblings, like even within our own family, there's differing levels of struggle and different types of learning, different strengths, different weaknesses. And sometimes within our families, I think the weaknesses might be more acceptable than other weaknesses. Of course, sin is sin to God. But sometimes in families, there are some things that might rub your family members the wrong way, like way more of a reaction. And so our kids have that to deal with, or extended family, other homeschool families. And so it's still something that they do have to deal with. I do think that homeschool has been a beautiful tool for our family because it has enabled us to at least lessen the frequency that our kids are faced with. You're not like these other kids. And I am trying to help my children understand that, again, that being different is not bad. In some ways, it's really good there are things that because you struggle in this area, you are very strong in this area. And I think that being able to homeschool gives me the opportunity to point out to them those things. I can be honest with my child and say, I see that this is a very hard thing for you. And I have learned that because you struggle with this, you have a gift in this area that others do not. The more typical person cannot do this thing that you can. And it's because God wired you this way. And it can help me having them at home with me and being able to tailor things more to their strengths than to expect things out of their weaknesses, so that they start to see that more than they see the hard part of it. It's two sides of the coin. And I try to keep it flipped to the look at the amazing things that you can do that God gave you. And we do have to face the other side sometimes, but we do it together and we're a team. And hopefully my children don't feel alone in it, even if they do still they're going to have their own battle and their own walk that they have to do. But I'm hoping that homeschool gets to be one of the tools we use to really equip them for that.
I love it. And I am obviously a big fan of homeschooling. And I think that when I think about homeschooling, sometimes I can even, and I know other parents fall into the trap that if I homeschool, then they will do this or right? Like,
yeah, the formulas.
The formulas.
Yes, absolutely.
The formulas. And one real thing is a lot of us think if we homeschool that our kids will become believers, and Lord willing that will happen, but that isn't always the case. And so like when I think about kids who are out of the box kids, I think about, well, it is up to the Lord and how he uses them and how they respond to that.
Yeah.
But I would be missing out on a great opportunity if I didn't take this time to be one-on-one with them, to coach them in their individual struggles, to call out the good, right? The good in that moment, because that is not the tendency. And I think that the Lord uses that not only to bring our children closer to him, but to sanctify us at the same time, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, man. My oldest is only 11, and I think, wow, I still have come so far from the beginning and have so much further to go.
Same.
Yeah. Well, these out-of-the-box kids are precious, and they're needed. They are truly the world changers of the future.
Yeah.
And I think as moms, we need to hear that. I wish I had that quote. It's from a president about his mom, or, what, do you know what it is?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact quote, but that's actually something that has been really encouraging to me, is that a lot of our presidents, a lot of our leaders, the pastors, like Billy Graham and Martin Luther, like all of these strong, amazing leaders, they were out of the box kids.
Yes.
And I think the quote that you're thinking is, everything that I am, I owe to my mother. Maybe something along those lines. And was it George Washington?
Oh.
We're going to need to look this up so that we can let the people know. But I think I know what you're saying, and the impact that all of these, I've heard many stories that these leaders attribute their success and everything that they became because of the work that their parents had done. So.
Yes. And it is a work of both parents, and it is a work of God. But it is something special and beautiful for these world changers to recognize the struggles that their parents, their moms went through to raise them up to be who they are today. And I just say that not to toot our own horns by any means, but to give us that extra oomph of encouragement, right? Just to say it's hard right now. And, when I have a 5-month-old and people say, well, the days are short, or the days are long, but the years are short. That can be said for all of childhood.
Yes.
Right? Like just mentioning earlier that me and you were at the birth class, and now our daughters are like becoming preteens. Yes. Like what happened?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I can still remember sitting next to you doing that Rabe method childbirth class, and just laughing about how awkward I felt.
we felt so awkward. But how thankful are we now for those classes and that time we got to have?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for being our very first to be on The Real Moms. I was nervous to call it The Real Moms because isn't there like a television show like The Real Wives?
It's The Real Wives.
Okay, good.
So different.
I was like, this is nothing like that. But it is a treasure and it is a blessing to hear from moms in the trenches, to hear from moms that have gone before us, and to hear how God works through each of us, no matter how many followers we have.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mary. And you guys, make sure to like and subscribe if you get a chance. It really helps that crazy algorithm. And we just want to get this message out to people to be an encouragement to parents. This time in life can feel lonely. It can feel without hope. It can feel confusing. And if we can get the message of the gospel out to parents, we are going to be like maybe George Washington when he quoted his mom.
There we go.
Right? Full circle.
Full circle.
Awesome. We'll see you guys soon.